I'm Deborah Frieze, the founder and president of the Boston Impact Initiative and a professor at Tufts University. And in this conversation about community-based investing, it begins with the question of what does a community need and what is the opportunity to make an investment in it? And I don't know any person better to explore that question with us than Robin Hacke, the co-founder of the Center for Community Investment. So she's going to introduce us to her Capital Absorption Framework and the great work that they've been doing, both conceptually and theoretically, and also granular, specific, and rigorous on the ground in communities. And that's that blend. That's the perfect way to enter into this journey into community-based investing. So, Robin, please introduce yourself to us and tell us what question your work is designed to be answering or exploring.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a finance person since I did my MBA. I was an investment banker. I was a venture capitalist. And I made the jump over to community investment about, it's already 14 years ago. And the question that I began to see coming up again and again in the work that I did for a philanthropic collaborative was, what does it really take to make a place investable? If we believe that the easy deals in capitalism kind of happen by themselves, they don't require a lot of heroic effort or other people who are really dedicated to getting it done, what does it take to invest in the places that have not had the kind of flow of capital that makes it easy for them to achieve their objectives? And so the Center for Community Investment is dedicated to getting those communities the investment resources that they need to thrive, whether that means investing in affordable housing, in grocery stores, in small businesses, in neighborhood revitalization. And we really have been, for the last 6 years, answering the question, what does it take to make a place investable? What activities should leaders be doing in that place to make sure that their goals and ambitions are achievable?
So, community economic development has been around for a long time, but this is community investment. Can you describe the difference and what the focus area is for you all?
Sure. So we go across different sectors and segments, and community economic development is actually one of the areas that requires community investment. Because if you're going to scale neighborhood businesses, if you're going to encourage entrepreneurial activity, whether it's food cart vendors or startups of other kinds, then there really has to be capital available, and that capital has to be on terms that make sense for the people that you're trying to serve. And it has to be available to them in ways that they can understand. In the modern United States, banks don't provide that kind of capital. Even Small Business Administration loans tend to be pretty big, $250,000 and above. If you're starting a neighborhood business, that's not for you. So community investment is the money, the resources that it takes to make the community economic development go, but also to bridge the gap in the number of units that are affordable homes for people who are making modest incomes. It's also early childhood centers and getting those financed. It's getting grocery stores into neighborhoods that are food deserts. It's across a whole spectrum of activities. And lately, it involves climate resilience.
So, usually people who are coming from community organizing or planning think that finance is for the finance people. And I've heard you describe finance as a kind of insider baseball. So can you say more of what that means? And also, how could those of us who don't come from finance step into this world? And why are we needed in this world of community investment?
Well, the non-finance people are needed because community investment is too important to be left to the finance priests. And I sometimes feel like the use of jargon and the use of language that's impenetrable to people who haven't studied it is a way of keeping people away. And what we say at the center is there is nothing in this world that is so complicated that a person who's interested can't understand it. And we also say that there's a role in particular for people who care about what the capital is meant to do. We call them mission stewards. And it's their job to ask the questions of the finance people and say, what would it take to make this doable? How come you're thinking about it in this way? And so we believe that people need just enough finance knowledge and the terminology to stay in the game, to stay in the room, because otherwise what you find is that the planners plan And then when it comes time to implement, the developers go into the back room and they make their pitch, and there's nobody who is a mission steward who can come and say, well, that's not really what we had in mind. And so we need community to stay in at every stage of the game to make sure that their ambitions get realized.
Excellent. I like hearing that doubled down on, because that's who these students are, and to recognize that their voice in the financial decision-making is critical. So you're going to be introducing us to the Capital Absorption Framework today in a couple segments. Where did that come from? Let's just start with that before we switch into the details on it.
Sure. So it came from an experience that I had with the co-founder of the Center for Community Investment already back in 2010, at the height of the foreclosure crisis, when we were trying to figure out what would it look like to invest in Baltimore, Cleveland, Detroit, Newark, and the Twin Cities, places that were really suffering in the foreclosure crisis, in order to achieve the things that the people living in those places cared about most. And their ambitions were different from city to city. So we had at our disposal in that initiative $15 million of grants, about $20 million of what is called philanthropic debt, so money from foundations that was pretty flexible but had to be paid back, and then about $55 million from banks and insurance companies. And that was at a modest return, and it was pretty easy terms. And we had absolutely no problem giving away the grants, because it turns out people like to get money, and that money didn't have to be paid back. But when it came to finding places to put the investments, we really struggled. And this was at a time when capital was not flowing. So we were kind of surprised. It was as though we had loaded a bag of money onto a plane and flown it to Detroit and just circled around and around Detroit looking for a place to land. And we couldn't find investable deals. And that set us off on the journey of trying to figure out what would it take to organize demand for capital in the same way that we had so successfully organized supply. And that's what we found happens very often, is that people are so focused on getting the money, on getting the supply of capital, that they forget to think really carefully about what are the deals and projects that are going to use that money, what kinds of terms and conditions do they need in order to make the thing successful. And that's the question that we're focused on, is what does it look like to make a place investable?
I really appreciate you highlighting the focus, the hyper-focus on raising the capital. I've, in my work across multiple cities around the country supporting community-based investment funds, the fund managers I work with are always talking about raising the money, raising the money, raising the money. And I'm like, that's great, but hold on. Where are you going to deploy it? How fast? At what rates? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just got to get the money secured first. And we're like, nope, they have to match, right? The sources and the uses have to match. So with that, we're about to go learn about the Capital Absorption Framework in the next segment.